Welcome to the Reprofiles, where infertility meets injustice and nothing is off limits.
We're two nurses. We're certified reproductive health advocates, and we're here to tell you everything they didn't.
From the broken systems to the heartbreak left behind, we're here to connect the facts, the policies, and the pain.
Because silence isn't safety, and we're done being quiet.
This is the Reprofiles.
Infertility, injustice, and all things nobody warned you about.
Hello. It is that time again for another episode of the Reprofiles. I am your host, Elizabeth Lee, and today I have a very special recurring guest with us. So this is Dr. Benjamin. I believe this is your third showing on the Reprofiles. Is that right?
Yes, but I feel like today I am the honorary co-host. So I feel like I've gotten elevated a little bit.
I agree. So I'm here with my honorary co-host, Dr. Benjamin, and today we're going to talk about the depth of how much words matter. And obviously, because this is a show about infertility and justice and all the things no one told you about, this has a direct tie to our topic. But in IVF and fertility care, there's this very unfortunate phrase that has been adopted. And I remember
there's lots of unfortunate phrases, but
that's
yes.
actually good fact. It's good fact. A lot of unfortunate phrases. Yes. But one of them is we call a patient who goes through a cycle to have an IUI or intrauterine insemination, or even a timed intercourse where maybe you weren't getting pregnant because the timing wasn't right, or IVF. If you don't get pregnant, the term is failed cycle. And I just despise that because who is the person?
It is accurate in its description, and it becomes a label upon a person.
That's right. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't cut you off. But
you're exactly right, because unfortunately, there's so much that is outside our control as fertility patients. We're going to take as much blame as the situation and our poor little brains will allow. And so when we say failed cycle, because it is the cycle that failed, not the patient.
Correct.
But man, how often do you hear in your work the effects of that phrase?
Every single time. Okay, let me track back. What didn't I do right? Was it that I was 30 minutes late with that medication? Is that what caused it? Was it that, I was in a place where someone was smoking distantly away from me and that's what it is trying to create a way this makes sense where you don't do the same thing the next time, because then you have some control, or it feels like you have some control.
Yeah. I mean, so much so, folks would ask, and I think I've talked about this before on this podcast, but they would ask us questions, and we at the time were using what was relatively new chat feature where we could have more asynchronous conversations with patients. And patients would ask the craziest things about, can I do blank? Everything.
Can I get my nails done?
Yep. And those
Can I get my hair dyed?
Right. Can I get my hair dyed? Can I get my nails done? Those are really common ones. But then you get ones that are sort of out of left field. So one of them is in Asian culture, they believe in drinking only hot drinks. Not only, but there's an association, or there's a preference or something where they drink hot drinks. And they say, is it okay if I drink a hot drink?
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it be?
Well, because maybe it would be warm and it would get somewhere in my body and make the embryo too warm. But I would
just the logic of it. I'm like, okay, but it has to go through your stomach, then into your blood flow, and your blood is already warm.
Right.
So,
and we're the professionals, right? So we can easily, logically parse through and be like, absolutely, that is fine. But as somebody who we talk about the 2-week wait, and that's an acronym that you'll see, like the patients will say, I'm in my TWW, I'm in my 2-week wait, can I do blank? But that is partially too, because that 2-week wait is Do you do
Yeah.
many sessions? I would assume you do sessions
Mm.
with patients during that 2-week wait.
Never. They never want to come in then.
Never?
They're so relaxed. They're so chill. No, all the time. Like sometimes it's like, I know I've already seen you once this week, but
Right.
can I come in again? Yep, sure.
And
It's
what is that time period overarchingly as you interact with patients in that phrase? What does that sound like from that perspective?
what if it doesn't work? Then what do I do? It's really focusing on what if the outcome is not how I desire it to be.
Mhm.
And what we're really talking about in the 2 week wait is actually generalizable for so many different situations. We're talking about uncertainty.
Mhm.
And human beings are actually not wired well for uncertainty. Like, this is something that we have to learn. How do we manage uncertainty? Because our brains are programmed to find what is dangerous or to find the problem to solve. That is how our brains come out of the box, manufacturer's version.
Yeah.
And so not in those two objectives, uncertainty is not one of them. It's your brain trying to make certain so that so your system can protect you.
Yeah, it's a safety mechanism.
Yep.
It's like a gauge that shuts off when it gets to a certain point because there's so much empty space there. I was in my 2-week wait for our IVF cycle. Yeah, and I worked in the clinic. I w so we I'm trying to recall if this was before I went through or after I went through. But, Doctor Mark Amos at New Direction Fertility Centers in Gilbert, he's a brilliant fertility doctor, and we did a study over I'm trying to remember the number of patients. It was a number of hundreds, in the hundreds of patients, and we
Okay.
had them come in on day 5, day 7, and day 10. And the question was or the hypothesis was, any patient who has an HCG of blank on day 5 or no, rather, take it backwards. Everybody in the study who got pregnant, there were recognizable HCG levels on day 5. So, and that I think could potentially I mean, I know this is some REI is gonna clap back and be like, "Nah, here's why all the reasons why that doesn't work." But part of me thinks maybe we should test on day 5. The problem is if you've got a slow starter, it wasn't 100% of the patients. I think it was like 99, but we all know that there are those instances. I saw cases where patients' HCG dropped, went back up, and they went on to deliver a live healthy baby. Some people in the field would say that that never happens.
No, because we're not necessarily testing everyone, right? Like,
Right.
but most of my clients are doing this. It's
Yeah.
not
Okay.
in a blood draw, it's peeing on a stick.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes,
And
yes,
so, and
yes.
then
Tell
it's
me more about that.
what is that? Is like is and it's I think the hard part about that too is, okay, I have it, and then it sort of becomes compulsive of every day I'm going to test because I need to compare, is the day before lighter than today? And you get to a point where it's like it's not going to get any brighter, like it's just where it is. That's still, you can have a chemical pregnancy, which happens all the time when people test. That's how they know it's a chemical pregnancy rather than just having a late period. Of
Mhm.
course, when we're talking about IUI or IVF, like, you're setting this up, you're aware of when transfer happens, or, when the IUI happens. So you're quite
Mhm.
aware of what needs to happen in the interim
Mhm.
rather than, I wasn't really tracking. Yeah, I think I got my period's late. All right. Well, it's been a stressful month. It's tax season.
Oh, is it ever? Yeah, no, I mean, so back to the topic of failed cycle. What have you thought through other ways that we could phrase that so that because I remember having a discussion about this with a couple of REIs at I want to say it was like a PCRS conference one year. Like, okay, if you don't say that, what do you say? And how could we
Right.
put it such that or Is it not that we need to change the name failed cycle? We need to teach patients and empower patients from day one that you are not your cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about these kinds of things, the first thing I like to think about is if I didn't have to go through IVF and I'm trying to get pregnant and I end up getting my period or the pregnancy test negative, do I sit there and say, oh, well, that was a failed month or maybe I do, in fact, but I'm really talking about it as, okay, the actions we took on this 1 or 2 or 3 particular days during this month did not give us the outcome we wanted. I'm not owning it as that's my fault. It didn't work. Although
Mhm.
I imagine some people do, particularly if there are lots of months in a row where there's a period rather than a positive pregnancy test. Think generally as a society, and I'm sorry to keep sort of going backwards. I promise I'm going to get to the answer.
That's
But
why
if
I
we
love
think of
having you as my honorary co-host. It's the best.
But when we think about just American society, who are the people in our society that are more ready to blame themselves? Unfortunately, it's been socially taught to those that identify as female. And we're taught it's all our fault. If dinner doesn't work out, that's our fault. If this doesn't happen, that's our fault. Things that are bizarre. And it's like, how actually could this be my fault? But if I'm socialized to apologize for everything that doesn't happen the way we hoped or expected,
That's right.
then of course I'm going to hold this as my fault if a cycle doesn't work or, I'm trying on my own to get pregnant and that's not the result I'm getting. Or I'm trying at home IUI, right? And I'm not getting the result that I'm hoping for. So I think that this is one of those cases where we have to really think about person first language. So the idea of person first language is the difference of your cycle failed
Mhm.
versus you had a failed cycle. So one is talking about a thing that happened to the person.
Mhm.
The other is directly talking about we're making it subtly with our language your fault.
Mhm. Yeah. It's fascinating that you mentioned that about women specifically. But I would take it even a step further and say, I think that the late Gen Xers and the millennials were probably more people pleasing as a generation than our parents' generation. And I say that because you see a lot of like if it's all on you and if you don't do this right, whatever it is, not only did you fail, but you're somehow a bad person for it. So
Right, right.
I met a when I first started in the realm of professional patient advocacy, I met this lovely woman, and it was during a time where I was really trying to figure out who I was by getting rid of all the things I told myself that were not true.
Mhm.
And she has a tattoo on her arm that says, "Talk to yourself like someone you love." And that was
That's
such
a
an
great reminder.
Right, it was such an eye-opening moment for me to look introspectively and say, "Why do I hold these beliefs? Why do I tend to skip to this is a failure on your part?" And much of it came back to that was kind of the way in which we were raised. I mean, the way you and I parent our children
So
is
different.
so different than how our parents parented us or their parents parented them. I mean, I grew up partially in a time where it was like be seen, not heard, be more quiet, be less you, be less than.
Be humble,
Right.
like you can't.
Yeah.
So
Confidence is seen as cockiness if you're a woman, right?
am I allowed to tell a kid's story here?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I want to be really sensitive of people where this might be hard to hear.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, just yeah, I would say just maybe a
All
small
right.
trigger warning.
Trigger warning for those of you listening. I'm going to share an anecdote about one of my children. Just an asterisk. I had a reproductive journey. So there we are. I remember being out with my parents and my daughter was with me and she's probably 3 years old and she is adorable. And we're sitting at the dinner table and it was a restaurant where other people knew us. And so they'd come up and they'd say hi. And so one person came up and they looked at my daughter and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you are beautiful." And my daughter's response was, "I know." And I thought that was hilarious.
Best
And
response ever.
my father is like, "You can't say that. Why is she saying that?" I'm like, "Well, it's true. So why can't she say it? None of us disagree with it." So, but it is such the difference between, speak speak when you're spoken to and only say reiterate back what they want to hear
Right.
versus speak your truth.
Yeah, that's think about that. That's exactly how I think that's a great example of the differing ways in which, we parent. Back to especially because yeah, back to the journey. How hard is it or how often do you hear the frustration when we can't determine what went wrong? So a cycle doesn't turn out like we hoped it did. So now we spend 2 weeks willing it to happen, testing like crazy, doing all these things. We get to
Being
whatever
really
is
careful,
yep,
really, really careful.
yep. And then all of a sudden you're like, it didn't work. And now I need to know what happened. Why?
It's
WTF
I
is
need
what
to know how to fix it. It's not like
yeah.
I need to figure out the why so
So
that I
that
can fix it. There is a so that in
that's
terms
right.
of like, not only am I'm taking responsibility for something that I had no control over, but I want to feel back in control. So if I know, then I can change
Yep,
something.
and that's you're right because they say, "Just tell me what to do. I'll do
Right.
anything." I would
Right.
stand on my head. I mean, I heard all the stories of things patients would be willing to do if it just meant that their cycle could turn out the way that they hoped it did. So
That's when people start turning in um, the hope to family build into a job, where it's no longer like the quest of building our family together and this is our journey. It is like a serious part-time job where you're reading all the things and all the studies. And of course, we know that studies contradict one another, particularly when you're trying to learn about something that isn't conclusive. So not all studies are going to agree. That makes sense. We should expect that. But also it is that feeling of helplessness because it's happening inside of me.
mhm.
So I'll have clients say, "Well, I'm too stressed about it. That's why I had the loss." And I'm like, "Oh, honey, no. Like you did not cause this," which is again just to echo one of my earlier phrases from another visit is stress does not cause infertility, but infertility causes stress.
Yep, you bet.
So you
But boy,
can't do that to yourself.
yeah. Yeah, I think back to advice that I would give patients when there was no clear right answer. I can't think of a great, like, example, but I would say effectively, if you don't do that thing here's a great example, acupuncture. So, a lot of patients ask, "Should I do acupuncture?" And I say, "A, there's great evidence to suggest that it can improve fertility rates. As long as you're not totally terrified of needles, there probably is no downside. And also, cost was I never worked in a clinic where cost was not a concern, ever.
Of course,
So
of
a
course.
lot of patients would be like, "That's $120 that I didn't budget for, and now I feel like if I don't do that, and it
I'm not
doesn't work
optimizing.
yeah, and if I don't do it and it doesn't work, then it's my fault, and then I should have done it." So that's why my advice was often, "Listen, there's no clear answer one way or another. The question you have to ask yourself is, if this thing that you're questioning doing or not doing, if the result is not what you hoped it would be, will you blame yourself for making that choice?"
Right. And most people might tell you, oh, and then it's like, actually, automatically you do.
To your office and they're like, not I lied, but you hope to have a
Right.
certain response in the moment. Can you think of any other this is just sort of a random question. Can you think of any other I guess maybe cancer care. I can't really think of another area of healthcare that's quite like this, where you can do everything right. You can sink every ounce of time, energy, money you have into this as a problem and it not work. I was trying to think if there are other instances in healthcare where the stakes are like that. Because for the most part, if you have diabetes and we get you on a great nutrition plan, exercise plan, and we get your blood sugar stabilized. We know exactly what insulin you respond best to, right? Studies say you're going to probably do great. But fertility would be one of those things I would say often to patients. Now, if you're type A like I am, I want to give you this warning, and that is you can do absolutely everything in this process perfectly right and still not get the outcome you're looking for.
So the corollary too that I like to give people is if you're telling me that in order to get pregnant, you have to do X, Y, and Z, how are people who are not wanting pregnancy or not considering it, how do they get pregnant then? Because they're not doing that. This is not even something maybe on their mind.
Mhm.
Or if they're, you know, trying on their own, they're not putting everything in it. So again, if that is how pregnancy works, why is it only limited
Right. Yeah.
and not consistently
Right.
here?
Yeah. And it is because it's a bit of a microcosm. You're surrounded by a lot of patients will find they'll seek out support throughout their journey, often from
Which is great.
online groups and things like that, which is fantastic. And also
And
filled
right,
filled with
double-edged sword.
other people that also are having trouble. And so it becomes this
Yeah.
an echo chamber of sorts that it allows you to believe that only if you do X, Y, and Z will you get pregnant. And
Right.
you make the point. Now, I could also see a patient saying, "Well, yeah, Dr. Bindeman, but everyone's not me. This is what's going on with me." And it seems like this is what's keeping me from becoming pregnant. Do you have to work a lot with helping folks reframe these
All the
negative
time.
thought
Yeah,
patterns?
like all of the time, because that's locked into. So when we have this kind of X equals Y, right? So I'm not doing all the things. So of course I'm not getting pregnant. And then we start trying to, tweak the equation to like X plus acupuncture equals Y,
Mhm.
or X plus supplements equals Y, or X plus supplements and acupuncture equals Y. Um, it's I do a lot of reframing, and a lot of it is just like, all right, so let's just simply logic our way through that, right? So you are telling me that to get pregnant, and yes, it might be you, but also you're not so special. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but other people have experienced similar things to you, and whatever the cause could be, um, if one is found, right, other people have this too.
Mhm.
And not all of them are able or want to do all of these things you're talking about. So how do they get pregnant then?
Right. Right.
Like, how do you explain those pregnancies to me?
Mhm.
And again, I think so much of it is just sitting with the uncertainty. And it's not just the uncertainty of the 2-week wait. It's the bigger uncertainty of, will I have a chance to be a parent?
Mhm.
And maybe it's, will I have a chance to be a parent to my own biological child? We can put that in there. So feeling like, okay, I can control it.
Mhm.
The hardest ones, and I want to acknowledge, because there's truth to it, is when I have people in their 40s who didn't realize that fertility wanes as we get older, but whose mom had 3 kids in her 40s and whose sister also had 2 kids in her 40s. So clearly it's not a thing to worry about. You know, became financially stable, a really important thing. You know, by the time all that happened, she's in her 40s and she's not getting pregnant. And it's not happening on her own as it had for her sister and her mom. And she starts thinking, well, what's wrong with me? Rather than, this is actually not genetic. So, it gets internalized even early on. And then it's, I shouldn't have waited so long.
Mhm.
And so, like, how I respond back to it is, well, what information did you have to make a different decision then? And it's, I didn't. Okay. So you're getting angry at your past self who did not have this new information you are learning now. And you're getting angry about a decision she made when she could only go with what she knew.
Yeah.
Why didn't I research it more? Because you didn't think you had to,
Had
and
to.
that made sense.
Yeah. Boy, that brings up such a point about, yeah, again, not taking ownership for things that you can't control. But I mean, we did that a lot. I mean, a lot of people's worries are just perseverating about what might be, what might have been, and
Yeah.
I
We can't get that time back. Like, I have not created a time travel device that would allow us to make different decisions in a moment. I think it'd be so interesting if we could go back in time, tweak the decision, and then see if the outcome was different. There's no way of actually doing that, but it would be really interesting to be like, well, was this really the thing?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
what if you go back in time, you make the change you think that you have to make, and oh my God, guess what? You're still in the same place.
Yep. Yeah, because then, boy, you'd look back and go, "I woulda used that time a little bit differently."
Exactly. Right. There's no winning in it.
There isn't, because even, think about, so we haven't talked as much about this, but I would say that probably even, some similar feelings and thought patterns is going to pop up when a pregnancy ends, because then there's a legitimate, yeah, I think there's a lot more blaming that goes on at that point.
So much, but it's a parallel kind of blame, as infertility is. It's okay, was it that beer I drank before I knew I was pregnant?
Mhm.
No, not at
Nope.
all. I mean, I had that perseveration because I have a history of recurrent losses. So my perseveration was, oh my God, I drank this. I didn't know I was pregnant. I'm 8 weeks, and I totally, that drink six
Was
weeks
it?
ago totally was responsible
It
for
was
my
that.
outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't even make sense because I digested it then.
Yeah.
It didn't carry over. Be a
Yeah.
problem if alcohol could last in our systems for 7 weeks.
Wouldn't that be something? My goodness. Certainly save some money on a night out, if you had that kind of residual. Yeah, I mean, I think also we see we see the joy of pregnancy even being robbed from infertility patients, because you go through all that you go through, and it honestly doesn't, in my mind, whether it's, 1 cycle or 50, I mean, you go through this and you look back and you're like, yeah, I mean, there's just times where all you can think about is that and obsess almost about, and then when you do get pregnant and you're worried, like you said, like every move you make. So that amplified anxiety that we see in the 2-week wait, I think for some people that wanes considerably once they achieve pregnancy. I probably somewhat dependent on how many cycles it took them,
And
but I think
dependent on what has happened to others in their,
Mhm.
in their group or in their family. So if
Yeah.
they have others that have had later losses in pregnancy, they might not feel so comfortable because it touched them,
Yep.
rather than someone who is divinely oblivious to anything going wrong in pregnancy,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, that's awesome. I'm glad people can experience it that way.
That's
It's
yeah,
really
I
special.
it is, and it is, yeah, it's the thing that they work so hard to get to. Now, do you see patients that, because this is another area of, like, loss slash sometimes you blame it on yourself type of thing, but patients who are really, 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 really sick as pregnant people, and
Hyperemesis?
what
Yeah.
what is that
Yeah.
like? Because I know I saw that steal people's joy, as it would, I mean, it being that sick, and then people would sometimes make the comment like, "Well, you signed up for this," and it was
That's
like,
so helpful.
right? So helpful, thanks
Thanks.
for that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I want to preface this by saying that hyperemesis gravidum can be life threatening.
Mhm.
So just because we're looking at it as like, oh, so they're throwing up a little more, well, that can quickly lead to lack of electrolytes, lack of nutrition, which not good for the person caring, nor is it good for the baby. And so, this is something that has killed people. Like, again, I need to be really clear. It is something too that gets poo-pooed a lot by OBGYNs.
It is.
Or maybe they'll give some medication, or maybe they'll be like, well, that's how you're supposed to feel at this point. Just, eat little bits throughout the day. Make sure that you stay hydrated. Make sure the second you wake up, put something in your mouth.
Mhm.
And they're not looking at, we might need to hospitalize someone so we
Mhm.
can give them intravenous fluids. But as soon as they're out of the hospital, it doesn't stop. Like, we can also give Zofran intravenously rather than having to swallow it,
Mhm.
which then might come up. It's not getting metabolized by the system. And not all medications work for some people. Sometimes it's combinations. Sometimes it's just nothing works.
Nothing
So
works.
I really want to paint a picture of what this really looks like. It's awful. And I've had clients where it was so awful that they didn't feel like they could live through the day. Some have made the decision of terminating the pregnancy, which is not an easy decision.
I mean, as somebody who was, very, 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 very sick
Me too.
and yeah, and had like home health in my house 4 days a week trying to get me IV fluids and nausea meds and this and that. And it really, I mean, when it's taking over your body, it's really hard to handle. And then if it was a fertility cycle, I think there's a lot of yeah, well, and there's a lot of like, did I make the right choice? Should I have not done this? This is my
Right.
fault. Like I pushed myself into this or, whatever. And or something along the lines of in their mind, they had never considered that pregnancy would be anything other than just happy. 'Cause that's all they really wanted was to be pregnant and have a baby, and so I think there's an assumption that when that happens, not that it's all sunshine and rainbows, but certainly not that you
Not
might have
this.
just signed up for 9 months. I mean, mine started at 5 weeks, 5 days.
Mine
And
too.
it did not end until the 3 hours after he was surgically removed from my body, and then I was
Yeah.
like I remember looking at my husband going, "I feel so much better."
Yes.
Like
Yes. And it's like almost immediate as you're describing. I mean, I've had clients that started with a grueling infertility journey, became pregnant, had awful hyperemesis, gave birth, but experienced a ton of birth trauma, and it's like, oh, they're just getting hit at every single point. And they feel like they can't feel badly about it
Mhm.
because I chose this.
Yeah.
I wanted this. I'm like, well, you didn't want hyperemesis. You didn't want birth trauma. So, no, you did not choose this. You wanted a baby.
That's
That's what you
right.
wanted.
That's right. You wanted to be a mom. You did not sign
Yep.
up for this. Yeah. And that's
Absolutely.
gosh, I feel so blessed that there are people like you in this field that only do this thing because it's so nuanced. And I do think I have heard patients come in and share with me pretty awful advice that they got from therapists about this.
God, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
What are some of the craziest things patients have ever come to you saying that another therapist either told them to do or told them in general?
So I had oftentimes I'll have clients that will start elsewhere and then they'll come to me because they're like, oh, that therapist doesn't know what she doesn't know. I had one client who had been with another therapist. She was on a second pregnancy. She was feeling detached from the pregnancy. So she went because she wasn't feeling like she was bonding with the baby.
Mm.
And she ended up having a stillbirth. So she felt the whole time something was off. And what she was being treated for was not being happy enough or not bonding well enough. And so she tried working with the other one who did not understand that experience. And we started working together. They did use IVF. They were able to have that second child. But I want to also acknowledge like the stories we don't hear. So I've had other clients that have been through the IVF ringer. They have tried everything and they don't come home with a baby. We never, right. We never talk about that because the solution for that is, oh, you can just adopt. There's a whole different can of worms filled with a lot of grief too there because adoptions fall through.
They do.
Yes, they do. Or you're not picked. So there are a lot of ways in which that might not work. And by the way, people don't have agencies out of the goodness of their heart. You're paying a lot of money to attempt this in the
Right.
same way that you do with IVF. I want to acknowledge like there are similarities between both of those paths. And when we suggest children is the answer to the problem of being childless or whatever you have experienced to go through, what we're really saying to people is you are not of value to our society unless you also have the value of being a parent.
Yes. Well, and that very narrative is being pushed by this current administration. Our sitting vice president prior, I think during still the election cycle, made a very cruel and demeaning comment about childless women
Childless
being
women.
cat ladies.
Yep.
And people like Turning Point and other groups that suggest that our role as women is to have babies and have families. That's it.
Mhm.
And
Right.
you
We
know,
make dinner and we have babies, right? So
that's
our
what we're
job
here
is in
for.
the
It's
kitchen.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. We
Stay
make
in the
food
kitchen.
and we do your laundry and we clean your house and we have your babies. But then beyond that, nothing. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know that we ever would have imagined that we would have an administration within the highest levels of US government even making comments like that. But I think it's pretty clear that their conservative view of the nuclear American family is very detrimental to those who are like, yeah, we would love to be having babies. Did you want to pay for the treatment? Did you want
Right.
to?
No, they're not because you don't see any of the IVF bills
Right.
going through and getting signed into
Right.
law.
So if it was really about having more babies,
It's not.
we lost the
It's
plot.
about controlling half the population. Yeah. Like, and let's be real about it. The job is not about the nuclear family. The job is about being able to control half of the population.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
we don't get uppity.
Right. You know your place. We know our place.
Yes.
Our place
It
is
is
on a
in,
podcast talking about how it's well past time that we stop with these
yeah.
nonsensical constructs that do nothing but harm people.
But Elizabeth, I do think your place is in the House, but the House of Representatives.
Okay, okay. I'm down with
Yeah.
that.
Is that okay?
That works.
Okay.
A woman's place is in the House of Representatives. Okay,
Representatives.
I'm feeling a new slogan. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Ah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And it's to all of you listening who either have gone through what we've been talking about or know somebody who has. I really hope you come away with one glaring thing, and that is you do, like you said, Dr. Benjamin, you do your best with the information you have at the time. And then you pick the pieces up and move forward no matter the outcome. And nowhere along that path is there blame or any of that because truly and completely taking control of just that which you can control will free you from a lot of that burden. I remember, we'll close with this because I remember this young patient that came into my clinic, and this was 7, 8 years ago, something like that, maybe. And they were young. I think they were in their late 20s, mid 20s, late
Mm,
20s. And they had been through every single possible which way of all of this. And
mm.
if they'd get pregnant, either they do an IVF cycle, they'd get no embryos, which doesn't make a lot of sense for two
Nope.
20 somethings. Then they would get embryos, but she'd miscarry. It was just like on and on and on. And something I noticed in her that was really beautiful to watch was you'd call her with the bad news and she's like, okay, when can we start again? Like there was
Yeah.
this level of acceptance of how much she couldn't control any of it.
So I might be careful about that because the when do we start again suggests that like that's what she is controlling and there is a point in
Sure.
time.
Sure.
If you hopefully have an REI who will say this to you, which is this doesn't seem to be working.
Right. Right, right.
We've tried different kinds of medications, we've tried different protocols. This does not seem working, and I can't tell you why.
And this was one of those patients that was like, "Okay, that's fair." Like, I mean, she just really
Yeah.
and it wasn't a, like, "When do we start again?" in an obsessive kind of way.
Okay.
It was this
Mine tend to be that. That's why I'm like,
No, it was more and the reason I thought of her is because I just saw a picture of her on social media yesterday with a giant 39-week, 4 a 39-week, 4-day bump and, like, about to deliver, and I just think back to those phone calls that I had with her where she was so positive that it would happen and that she would just do what she could and not and she I never felt like that she just I don't know, she had a wonderful spirit about her that was, I know I don't have control over this, so I'm gonna just come do what y'all tell me to do. I'm not gonna stress and obsess, and if it works, it works, and it finally did work, and yeah, but you bring up a solid point too, and that is sometime, there has to be the hard conversation that is, "Okay, actually, when do we start again?" I don't know if that's the right question to be asking at this stage. And those
let's
are the
sit
conversations
down.
yeah, that I think are critical because you and I have
Yes.
seen patients whose REIs will never tell them that.
I know. I know. Like, I know that there are the quote clinics of last resort.
Mhm. Yep.
So,
And you
yeah,
know
and
what's
I know
hard
where they
about
are.
what's hard about those is that though even those patients get some of them come and get
Some of
pregnant
them get
as
pregnant.
last resorts.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That alone, that alone makes it hard because 'cause you're like, "Well, I know this one person I heard on Facebook on their
Right, right.
22nd cycle," and that's actually very true. I had a patient finally get
22 cycles.
22 cycles, like, over 4 years' time. It was wild, child.
Wow, that's also really fast. Like, you're just constantly on medication.
Yeah, and I don't know what the outcome of all of that was. I
Yeah.
didn't get to see that one necessarily through to the end, but yeah, it's a burden no matter which way you look at it, and I think that if you take anything away from this episode, either for yourself or someone you care about, it is that you are never to blame unless you just blatantly ignore your fertility clinic's instructions and do not take your
Correct.
medications and do not show for your
Right.
procedures.
Right. Or you're shooting something else in your body that
Yeah,
is not medications, but might be something illicit,
right,
then
right.
that's going to have an impact.
Right, exactly, but beyond that, I mean, you gotta let go and really just let it be, and so know that it's if you're getting maybe you're listening and you're getting ready to start your 5th IVF cycle. That's a hard place to be in, and I hope you heard today that it is not there's nothing you could have done differently to not
Yeah.
be in this position, and the
And
best
this position's really hard to
and
be in, right? They're both true.
yeah, yeah,
And two things can be true at the same time.
yeah.
So unfortunately, I have to force this to end.
Yep,
You're welcome
because
to
you
talk
have
to
to go
yourself.
see another patient. So thank
I
you all
do.
for listening, for watching. We really appreciate it. Dr. Bindeman, thank you for joining me today as my honorary co-host, and we will see you all next time.